She didn't stop to think. She didn't wait for the firefighters. She ran straight into the fire. Everyone else was running out. Loretta ran in because somewhere inside that burning building, a little boy in a wheelchair was waiting to die, and nobody else was moving. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his father's name. God help her, she should have. Because the moment she carried that child out of the flames, her ordinary life ended, and something far more dangerous began. Subscribe now. Drop your city in the comments. Let's begin. The smell hit her first. Not smoke, not burning wood. It was something chemical, sharp and wrong, the kind of smell that makes the back of your throat close up and your eyes water before you even realize what's happening. Loretta Vasquez was 34 steps away from the front door of Angelo's diner when she felt the heat. She stopped walking. Across the street, the old brownstone on West 48th was breathing fire from its second-floor windows, orange and violent, billowing outward like something alive was trying to escape through the glass. People were already gathering on the sidewalk. A woman in a bathrobe, an old man with a phone pressed to his ear, a teenager recording on his camera, mouth open. Nobody was going in. Loretta's shift started in 4 minutes. She still had her apron in her bag. She had a table of regulars who tipped badly, but came every Thursday without fail, and a manager named Dennis, who would dock her pay if she was even 1 minute late. She looked at the burning building. She looked at her watch. And then she saw him. Third window from the left. Second floor. A small face pressed against the glass, pale, terrified mouth, moving, and beside him the unmistakable outline of a wheelchair. Oh, God. The word came out of her as a whisper, not a prayer. More like a recognition, like her body understood something her brain hadn't caught up to yet. She was already moving. Hey, hey! The man next to her grabbed her arm, middle-aged construction jacket, eyes wide. Lady, what are you? The fire department is coming. You can't let go of me. She said it quietly, the way you say something when you mean it absolutely. He let go. The front door of the brownstone was unlocked. She'd half expected it to be sealed, barricaded something, but it swung open like it was waiting for her. The heat that came through was a physical thing. It pushed back against her chest like a wall. She went in anyway. The staircase was still passable, barely. Smoke poured down from the second floor like a slow black tide, and Loretta pressed her jacket sleeve over her mouth and nose and climbed 1 step, 2 steps, her eyes burning, her lungs already screaming. She counted windows in her head. Third from the left. Third from the left. The hallway at the top was a different world. The fire was at the far end, eating through what looked like a storage room or a back apartment, and the smoke here was dense enough that she couldn't see more than 4 or 5 feet in front of her. She stayed low, one hand trailing the wall. Hello? Her voice came out cracked and thin. Is somebody there? I saw. You, is somebody there? Silence, then barely audible through the roar of the fire, a sound. Not words, just a sound, small and choked like someone trying very hard not to cry. Loretta moved toward it. The door was the third one on the right. She almost missed it in the smoke, and it was closed but not locked. And when she pushed it open, she found him. He was small, maybe 8 years old. Dark hair, dark eyes wide, with something that wasn't just fear. It was the look of a child who had decided that no one was coming. A child who had already made peace with that fact. He was in the wheelchair, one hand gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles had gone white. It's okay, Loretta said, even though nothing about any of this was okay. I've got you. I've got you, okay. The boy didn't speak. He just looked at her, studied her really with those serious dark eyes, and then he gave a single careful nod. She didn't waste time. She couldn't take the chair, she knew that, before she even looked at the staircase. She bent down, slid her arms under him, and lifted. He was lighter than she expected. He wrapped his arms around her neck without being told to, and she tucked his head against her shoulder, and she ran. Later, she would not be able to reconstruct how she got back down the stairs. She remembered the heat. She remembered the sound of something structural, giving way somewhere above her, a crack like a gunshot, and she remembered ducking instinctively, her shoulders slamming into the wall. She remembered the boy's grip tightening on her neck. She remembered the light at the bottom of the staircase, the rectangle of gray morning sky through the open front door, and how she ran toward it like it was the only thing left in the world. She came out through the front door gasping, and the crowd surged toward her, and someone caught her. She didn't know who, and she was lowering the boy to the ground, and someone was saying something to her, and she couldn't hear any of it over the ringing in her ears and the sound of her own ragged breathing. She looked down at the boy. He looked back up at her. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. Quiet, precise, oddly formal for a child, like he'd been taught to speak that way. And then the paramedics were there, and someone was wrapping a blanket around Loretta's shoulders, and the boy was being loaded onto a stretcher, and the fire trucks were finally arriving, and everything became noise and motion, and the particular chaos of a crisis being managed by professionals. Loretta sat down on the curb. She pressed her palms against her knees to stop them from shaking. She was going to be very, very late for her shift. Dennis fired her anyway, not for being late, for leaving without authorization, which was technically accurate since she dropped her bag at the door of the diner and sprinted across the street without telling anyone. A customer had apparently seen her go into the burning building. The customer had told Dennis. Dennis had apparently watched from the diner window for a while before deciding that calling anyone would be getting involved. "You put the diner at risk," he told her, standing behind his little manager's counter with his little manager's face. "You're supposed to be representing Angelo's. What if you died? You think that looks good for us?" Loretta stared at him for a long moment. "I'm going to need my last check by Friday," she said. She went home and took a shower that was approximately 45 minutes long. The police came to her apartment the next morning. 2 detectives. One was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead named Reyes. The other was younger, thin, kept checking his phone. "Moretti," he said, and then put the phone away, at least partially. "Ms. Vasquez," Reyes said, settling into Loretta's one good chair like she'd been invited to stay. "We're following up on the incident at 4714 West 48th. You were treated at the scene for smoke inhalation. Mild. They didn't even take me to the hospital." "Right. And you reported to the first responders that you pulled a child from the building." "I didn't report it. It happened. I told them about it because they asked." Reyes looked at her notes. "The thing is, Ms. Vasquez, no child was reported missing. No child was admitted to any area hospital following the incident. The building's tenant records show 2 adult occupants, both of whom are accounted for." Loretta felt something cold move through her. "I held him," she said. "I carried him down the stairs. He said thank you to me. Smoke inhalation can cause..." "Don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. She softened it deliberately. "Please don't. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. He couldn't have been more than 60 pounds. I carried him. He spoke to me." Moretti, who had been quiet until now, looked up from his notebook. "Can you describe him?" "Dark hair. Dark eyes. 8, maybe 9 years old. He was in a wheelchair. He seemed..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Calm. Like he was frightened, but he decided not to show it." Moretti wrote something down. He and Reyes exchanged a look she wasn't supposed to catch. She caught it. "What was that?" she asked. "What?" "That look. You know something." Reyes closed her notebook. "Ms. Vasquez, we appreciate you talking to us. If anything else comes back to you, even if it seems small, here's my card." They left. Loretta sat at her kitchen table for a long time after that, turning the card over in her hands. The look on Moretti's face when she described the boy. Calm. Like he was frightened, but he'd decided not to show it. That look wasn't confusion. It wasn't skepticism. It was recognition. She went back to the block 2 days later. She wasn't sure why. She had no job to go to, no errands in that neighborhood. She told herself she just needed to see the building, needed to see the physical reality of it, the scorch marks and the police tape and the collapsed window frames as a way of confirming to herself that she hadn't invented any of it. She stood across the street and looked at it for a while. The brownstone was still standing, but barely. The second floor was hollowed-out windows boarded the facade above the second story streaked with black. Police tape across the front entrance. A few curious pedestrians glancing at it and moving on. "You're the woman from the news." She turned. The man was standing perhaps 5 feet away. She hadn't heard him approach, which, given that she was standing on a busy Manhattan sidewalk, shouldn't have been possible. He was tall, well-dressed in a way that was deliberate but understated, dark coat, no tie, a watch that she clocked as expensive without being able to say exactly why. Late 40s maybe, black hair going gray at the temples. A face that might have been handsome once and had become something more interesting than that. He wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at her. "I'm sorry," she said. "There was a piece on the local news. Woman runs into burning building, saves a child. Except the police say there was no child. He paused. They interviewed you, very briefly. You didn't say much. I didn't have much to say that they believed. What if I told you, the man said, that I believe you? Something shifted in the air between them. She couldn't have described it. It wasn't menace exactly. It wasn't warmth either. It was more like weight, the feeling of standing next to something that has significant gravity. I'd ask you how, she said carefully, since apparently no one in this city has any record of the boy existing. His name is Luca, the man said. He is 8 years old. He's been in a wheelchair for 2 years, and he is currently safe. Loretta's heart stopped for what felt like a full second. Where is he? Somewhere better than that building. The man's voice was even controlled. My name is Alex Esposito, and I owe you a debt I don't know how to repay. She should have walked away. She knew that. She'd known enough men who carried themselves like Alex Esposito to understand what that bearing meant, the particular stillness of a man who was accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room he entered. She had grown up in a neighborhood where men like that existed, and she had worked very hard for a very long time to exist in spaces they didn't. But Luca's face was still in her memory. Thank you, those two careful words, and the look on Moretti's face. How did he end up in that building? She asked. Something moved through Alex Esposito's expression. Fast, controlled, contained, but she saw it. Pain or something adjacent to pain. That's what I'm still trying to understand, he said. Was it an accident? The pause before he answered was one beat too long. No, he said, it was not. Loretta absorbed that. Someone set the fire. Yes. To kill him. Yes. She looked at the burned-out brownstone. She looked back at Alex Esposito. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't fully read, something careful, something measuring. Why are you telling me this? She asked. You could have just sent someone to find me and thank me and send me on my way. Why are you telling me your son was a target? Because Alex said you ran into a building to save a child you had never met, without hesitation, without calculation. And when you came out, you were more worried about whether he was frightened than whether you were hurt. He paused. A person like that is rare. I find that I would like to keep you close. The phrasing made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Keep me close, she repeated slowly. Luca needs someone. Alex's voice shifted just slightly, just enough. Something underneath the control that sounded almost human. He has been alone in certain ways that a boy his age should not be alone. He won't speak to the people I have assigned to him. Doctors, therapists, he sits through them like they're weather. He doesn't connect with them. But he talked to me. He said thank you. Alex almost smiled, almost. For Luca, that is a significant development. Loretta looked down at her shoes, then back up at this man, this careful, dangerous, grief-shadowed man, standing on a Manhattan sidewalk, talking about his 8-year-old son, as though he were solving an equation. What exactly are you offering me? She asked. A job, room and board, salary generous. You would live in my home and care for Luca, read to him, take him to appointments, be present in the ways that He stopped, started again. In the ways that are difficult for me to manage given the demands of my work. And what is your work, Mr. Esposito? He met her eyes, direct, steady, entirely unashamed. You know what my work is, he said. You know my name? She did. She hadn't placed it immediately, not on the sidewalk, not when he first said it, but somewhere in the past 30 seconds it had clicked into place, quiet and certain like a key in a lock. Esposito. She'd heard that name in the news, in conversation. In the particular way people lowered their voices in certain neighborhoods when they wanted to indicate that some things were better left unasked. You're asking me to move into the home of a man who runs. I'm asking you, Alex said quietly, to help a small boy who has already survived more than any child should have to survive. The rest of it, what I am, what I do, I am not asking you to be part of that. I am asking you to be part of him. The silence stretched between them. Somewhere behind her, a cab honked. A dog barked. The city moved around them the way cities do, indifferent, relentless, magnificent. I'll need a day to think, Loretta said. Of course. And I'll need to meet him first, before I decide anything. Alex reached into his coat pocket and produced a card. No name on it, just a phone number. Call that number, he said. When you're ready, He turned and walked away down the sidewalk, not quickly, not dramatically, just with the absolute unhurried certainty of a man who has never once in his adult life needed to rush toward anything because the things he wanted had always eventually come to him. Loretta stood holding the card. She looked at the burned-out building one more time. Luca. That was his name. She'd carried him down 2 flights of stairs while the building came apart around her, and she hadn't even known his name until 30 seconds ago. She turned the card over in her hands. Called. Hello. The voice on the other end was a woman's brisk professional. My name is Loretta Vasquez, she said. Mr. Esposito asked me to call. A pause. Yes, Ms. Vasquez. We've been expecting you. She closed her eyes. Of course you have, she thought. Of course you have. The car that came for her the next morning was black, quiet, and expensive, in a way that made no noise about it. The driver did not introduce himself. He simply opened the door, waited for her to get in, and drove. Loretta had packed one bag, practical things. She had told her neighbor, Mrs. Huang, that she would be staying with a friend for a while, and Mrs. Huang had looked at the black car idling at the curb and said nothing, which was perhaps the most alarming response possible. The drive took 40 minutes. They crossed into a part of the city that Loretta had passed through, but never stopped in the kind of block where the buildings had no numbers visible from the street, and the doormen didn't make eye contact with strangers. The car stopped in front of a townhouse, 4 stories, pristine, quiet, impenetrable. The driver opened her door. She got out. She stood on the sidewalk with her one bag and looked up at the building. This is a mistake, she thought clearly and completely. Then she went inside anyway. The woman who met her at the door was somewhere in her 50s, sharp-faced, efficient, with the posture of someone who had spent decades being indispensable. She introduced herself as Elena. No last name. She showed Loretta her room on the 3rd floor, showed her the kitchen, showed her where Luca's room was, and then stopped in the hallway outside it. He knows you're coming, Elena said. Mr. Esposito told him this morning. How did he react? Elena paused just a fraction of a second, but enough. He didn't say anything, but he asked me to open the window. Loretta didn't understand why that felt like something, but it did. I'll give him a few minutes, she said, before I knock. Elena looked at her with an expression that might have been the beginning of approval. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Esposito is not here during the day. He has asked that you not leave the building with Luca without informing him first. Informing him or asking permission. The pause was longer this time. Informing him, Elena said carefully and walked away. Loretta stood in the hallway. She counted to 60. Then she knocked. It's open. The voice was the same quiet, precise, older sounding than it had any right to be. She pushed the door open and went in. Luca Esposito was sitting at a desk near the window, a book open in front of him. He was wearing a navy sweater. His dark hair was combed. He looked exactly like the child she had carried out of a burning building, except now he was clean and composed and looking at her with those serious eyes like he was conducting an interview. You came back, he said. I said I would. People say things. He said it without bitterness. Matter of fact, the way you state the weather. Loretta pulled the chair from the corner of the room and sat down across from him. Eye level, she did this deliberately. She had learned over years of watching people talk to children like they were shorter versions of furniture that eye level was a different kind of respect. What are you reading? She asked. He tilted the cover toward her. The Count of Monte Cristo. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Is that the abridged version, Herin? No. How old are you? 8. I'll be 9 in March. You're reading The Count of Monte Cristo at 8. My father gave it to me. Something shifted in his face. He said it was about a man who was put in prison for something he didn't do and had to find a way out by himself. The silence that followed was weighted in a way Loretta didn't fully understand yet. Do you like it? She asked. I like the parts where Edmund stops being afraid, Luca said. I'm still waiting for those parts. Loretta looked at this 8-year-old boy reading Alexandre Dumas and waiting for the part where fear ends, and she felt something shift in her chest, not pity exactly, but something adjacent to recognition. The feeling of seeing yourself in someone you had no right to see yourself in. Those parts come, she said. I promise. He studied her. How do you know? Because I've read it. He considered this. Then very carefully he put a bookmark in his page and closed the book. Okay, he said. You can stay. Alex Esposito came home at 9 o'clock that evening, 2 hours after dinner, moving through the front door with the controlled ease of a man returning to a space he owned completely. He found Loretta in the sitting room off the kitchen, a cup of tea going cold on the table beside her reading. He stopped in the doorway. "How was he?" he asked. "Good. We talked for almost 2 hours. He's extraordinary." Something moved through Alex's face too quickly for her to name. "Yes," he said, "he is. He told me about the accident, the bomb." She watched his face carefully when she said it. "He told me he was in the car with you." "He told you that?" Alex's voice was very even. "Yes. He doesn't usually talk about it." "He didn't talk about it much. He just mentioned it. Then he asked me if I was scared when I came into the building to get him." "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I was terrified." Alex moved into the room, then sat down in the chair across from her, which was something she hadn't expected. She'd half anticipated that he would nod and leave the way powerful men did when they'd extracted the information they needed. But he sat down and he looked tired in a way that was different from the composed, measured man on the sidewalk. "He asked you why you came in if you were scared," Alex said. "It wasn't a question." "How did you know?" "Because it's what I would ask." He was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that being scared and being brave aren't opposites. You can be both at the same time. One doesn't cancel the other out." Alex looked at her for a long moment. "He's not sleeping well," he said finally. "Since the fire. The nightmares are worse. Elena tries, but he won't. He doesn't want Elena. He tolerates her. He told me he has trouble sleeping too." Alex's jaw tightened. "Did he?" "He said he keeps dreaming about the smoke, that in the dream no one comes." The silence in the room was profound. Alex Esposito, Mafia boss, a man whose name lowered voices in 6 boroughs, sat very still, with the particular stillness of a person trying to keep something inside themselves from coming out. "He'll sleep better," Loretta said quietly. "Give him time." "I don't have a record of things getting better with time," Alex said. "In my experience, time mostly just adds distance to problems. It doesn't solve them." "Then your experience is limited," she said. He looked at her sharply. She held his gaze without flinching. Something in his face shifted. Not quite a smile, something more complicated than that. Acknowledgement maybe, or the beginning of it. "Get some sleep, Osasis Vasquez," he said. "Elena will show you anything you need in the morning." He stood and he left, and Loretta sat for a moment longer with her cold tea and thought about a man who had put the Count of Monte Cristo in his 80-year-old son's hands and told him it was about learning to survive alone. The first week passed, then the second. Loretta settled into the rhythms of the house carefully, the way you lower yourself into water. You haven't tested the temperature of yet. She learned which hallways had security cameras and which did not because she was looking, but because it was impossible not to notice when you were observant and had time to be. She learned that there were always 2 men on the ground floor rotating different faces, but always 2. She learned that Elena's efficiency masked a genuine fierceness, where Luca was concerned that the woman would have walked through fire for the boy herself if she'd thought she could make it. She learned that Luca was extraordinarily intelligent, surprisingly funny in a dry and quiet way, and utterly alone in the way that only children who have been surrounded by adults for too long can be. She read to him at night, not because he couldn't read himself, he was better than most adults, but because she'd noticed on the 3rd day that when she sat with the book in the armchair beside his bed and read out loud, his hands relaxed. That death grip on the armrests of the wheelchair, the white-knuckled tension he carried everywhere, it loosened just slightly with the sound of a voice that wasn't asking him anything. She started with Monte Cristo. They got to the part where Edmund stops being afraid. Luca didn't say anything when they reached it, but he made her read the passage twice. Alex was home most evenings, but rarely in the same room as Luca for more than half an hour. She watched this the way they existed in parallel inside the same house, loving each other across distances. Neither of them seemed to know how to close. Alex would look in on Luca from the doorway. Luca would look up from his book and wait. Alex would say something practical. "Did you eat? Did you take your medication? Is the heat too low?" And Luca would answer precisely, and then the moment would stretch until Alex nodded and left. On the 9th evening, Loretta stopped Alex in the hallway after one of these exchanges. "He wants you to stay," she said. "When you look in, He's waiting for you to come in and sit down. Alex looked at her. I know. Then why don't you? Because, he said, and stopped. He looked down at the carpet. Because when I'm in that room, I see the wheelchair. And when I see the wheelchair, I see what happened to put him in it. And I am not, he stopped again. I am not someone who handles guilt gracefully. He doesn't need graceful, Loretta said. He needs present. She went to bed. The next morning, Elena told her in the brisk informational tone she used for everything that Alex had sat with Luca for 2 hours the previous evening, that they had apparently read together, that Luca had fallen asleep in the middle of a chapter and had not had a nightmare for the first time in 3 weeks. Loretta drank her coffee and said nothing, but she allowed herself to feel quietly and privately that she had done something right. That was the last uncomplicated feeling she would have for a very long time. It was the end of the second week when she found the lighter. She wasn't looking for anything. She was pulling a chair away from the wall in the hallway outside the security office on the second floor. Luca had dropped a book behind it, asked her to retrieve it, and when she moved the chair, the lighter fell from the gap between the baseboard and the floor and skittered across the tile. She picked it up. It was expensive, matte black, heavy, engraved with initials on the side. MV, she turned it over. The hinge was slightly loose, the kind of looseness that came from frequent use. And along the base there was a residue, faint grayish clinging to the metal seam. She was a waitress. She was not a detective, not a chemist, not anything that would have given her a professional framework for what she was looking at. But she had grown up in a neighborhood where she'd seen burned-out cars and burned-out buildings, and she knew what accelerant residue looked like when it had dried and been overlooked. She stood there for a long moment, holding the lighter. MV. She thought about the men she had seen in this house, the rotating faces on the ground floor. Elena, 2 or 3 others, she'd been casually introduced to names delivered the way you deliver the names of furniture. Here is the table, here is the sofa, here is Marco Vitale. She'd met him on her 4th day. He was Alex's right hand, tall, quiet, handsome in a cold way, eyes that tracked everything in the room like a surveillance system. He had shaken her hand when they were introduced and held it a half-second too long in a way that was not flirtation, but something more like measurement. MV. She put the lighter in her pocket. She found Elena and told her she was taking Luca for an indoor reading session in the library on the 1st floor. Elena nodded. Normal. Routine. They had done it before. Loretta sat with Luca for an hour reading, keeping her voice steady, thinking. When Alex came home that evening, she was waiting in the front hallway. I need to talk to you, she said. Alone. He looked at her face. Something in it made him nod immediately and gesture toward his office. She put the lighter on his desk. He looked at it. He didn't touch it. Where did you find this? His voice was completely flat. 2nd floor hallway, behind the chair near the security office. She paused. The residue on the base, I think it's accelerant. I think this lighter was in that building. I think whoever set that fire might have dropped it afterward or lost it or... Those are Marco's initials, Alex said. I know. The silence was absolute. Marco has been with me for 11 years, Alex said. Very quiet. He was the one who pulled me out of the car after the bomb. He carried me. He sat at my bedside. I know that's what you believe, Loretta said carefully. You're telling me that the man who saved my life set fire to a building with my son in it. I'm telling you what I found and where I found it. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you what the facts are. Alex stood up. He walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the particular rigidity of a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. You could be wrong, he said. Yes. The lighter could have ended up there 100 different ways. Yes. Marco has no reason. Everyone has a reason for something, she said. I don't know his. I'm not asking you to act on what I found. I'm asking you to look into it. Quietly, without telling him. Alex turned around. His face was controlled, but she could see what was underneath, not anger, not disbelief. Worse than both. The dawning, terrible awareness of a man who was beginning to suspect that he might have been monumentally, catastrophically wrong about someone he loved. You need to leave this alone, he said. This is not your world. You don't understand the rules. A child almost died, she said. That's the only rule I understand. She left the lighter on his desk and walked out. She went to Luca's room. He was still awake, book in hand, and he looked up at her when she came in and immediately read something in her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. "Move over." He looked at her for a moment, those serious two old eyes, and then he moved his wheelchair aside to make room for her to sit on the edge of his bed, and she opened the book and she started to read. Her hands were shaking. She kept her voice even. She was 3 pages in when she heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, and she recognized them as Marco's, before she'd even consciously processed the sound. They paused outside the door. She kept reading. She did not look up. The footsteps moved on, but they had paused, and she was certain as she'd been, that the boy in the window was real, as certain as she'd been that the residue on the lighter was wrong, that Marco had stopped there intentionally, that he had known she found it, that he was deciding something. She kept her voice steady through to the end of the chapter. She said goodnight to Luca. She walked back to her own room. She locked the door. For the first time since she'd moved into this house, she pushed the chair in front of it too. She didn't sleep. Not because she was being dramatic about it. Not because she was the kind of woman who catastrophized and spiraled. She didn't sleep because she was lying in the dark, doing the one thing she was genuinely good at: reading people. And the more she read the situation, the more certain she became that she had approximately 12 hours before Marco Vitale decided she was a problem that needed to be solved permanently. She went through everything twice, then a third time. Marco had been with Alex for 11 years. 11 years of access, of trust, of being the man standing closest to the center of everything. If he had wanted Alex dead, Alex would have been dead a dozen times over. So Marco wasn't trying to destroy Alex's empire. He was trying to inherit it. And the only thing standing between Marco and that inheritance was a small boy in a wheelchair on the 3rd floor. Luca, Alex's son, Alex's heir. The one person whose existence made it impossible for Marco to simply wait for an opportunity. She sat up in bed at 4 a.m. and pressed her palms to her eyes. "He pulled me out of the car after the bomb." That was what Alex had said. Marco had saved him, had sat at his bedside. She turned that over and over, because it didn't fit. If Marco wanted the empire, why save Alex after the bomb? Why not let him die? And then slowly it came to her. Because Alex dying in that moment would have triggered a succession war. Marco wasn't powerful enough yet. He needed more time. He needed Alex alive and dependent and grateful, needed to be the indispensable right hand, the most trusted man, the one who got closer and closer to the center until the center was effectively his. The bomb hadn't been meant to kill Alex. It had been meant to paralyze Luca. She felt sick. She got out of bed. She put on her shoes. She sat in the chair she had pushed in front of the door and waited for morning. At 6:15, she heard movement in the hallway, not Marco's particular footsteps, lighter, quicker. Elena. She waited until she heard Elena reach the kitchen 2 floors down, and then she moved the chair and she went to find Alex. He was in his office. He hadn't slept either. She could tell from the second she pushed the door open, but not from the coffee cup or the open files or any of the obvious things, but from the particular quality of stillness he had. It was a man who had been sitting in one place turning something over for hours. He looked up when she came in. "The bomb," she said, no preamble. "The one 2 years ago. You said Luca was in the car with you." "Yes." "Were you the target or was he?" Alex's jaw tightened. "Everyone assumed that I was," he said. "The device was under the driver's side. But Luca was sitting behind the driver. The blast would have." "Yes." The word was a wall. "I know where my son was sitting." Alex. She used his first name without thinking about it. "If Marco placed that bomb, he didn't place it to kill you. He placed it to hurt Luca badly enough that over time your son would be seen as unsuitable, incapable of running anything. It was the beginning of a long plan." The silence was total. "And the fire," she continued, "was because the plan had taken too long, because Luca was getting stronger, because you were maybe starting to see him differently. Marco needed to finish it." Alex stood up from his desk so suddenly that the chair scraped back against the floor, and for one violent, instinctive second, she took a step backward. Not because she was afraid of Alex exactly, because she was suddenly viscerally aware of exactly what kind of man she was in a room with at 6 a.m. But he didn't move toward her. He moved to the window, his back to her, both hands flat on the frame. 11 years, he said. His voice was very low. "I gave that man 11 years of my life." I know. I trusted him with my son. After the accident, he was the one I trusted to. He stopped. He was the one I sent to look after Luca while I dealt with the people who I thought were responsible for the bomb. He sent himself to look after Luca, Loretta said, so he could make sure Luca didn't recover faster than expected, so he could control the information you received about your son's progress. Alex turned around. His face in that moment was something she would not forget for a long time. It was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was the particular devastation of a man who has just understood the full scale of how completely he has been deceived by someone he loved. How do you know all of this? He asked. How does a waitress from West 48th see all of this? Because I've been watching people my whole life, she said, and because I have nothing invested in any of you except Luca, which means I see it clearly. He was quiet for a long moment. I need to handle this carefully, he said finally. If Marco suspects that I know, he already suspects something, she said. He stopped outside Luca's door last night. He heard me find the lighter, or he found out some other way. He's deciding how much time he has. The air in the room changed. Alex looked at her with new sharpness. How long ago? Last night, around 10. You should have come to me immediately. You told me to leave it alone. A beat. I was wrong. It was 3 words. Simple, direct. She suspected it was not a sentence Alex Esposito used frequently, and the fact that he said it now without qualification, without softening, told her something important about him. What are you going to do? She asked. Right now, he said, I'm going to do nothing. Because if I move on Marco before I have everything, he will know and he will run, and running men are desperate men. He met her eyes. I need you to do something for me. What? Behave exactly as you have been, normal, routine. Don't look at him differently. Don't avoid him. Don't. I know how to do this, she said. I've been pretending everything is fine since I was 16 years old. I'm very good at it. Something shifted in his expression. He didn't push it. He nodded. Keep Luca close to you today, he said. Don't let him be alone with anyone but Elena. And you trust Elena completely. She's been with my family since before Luca was born. Marco knows better than to touch Elena. Okay, she turned to go. Loretta, she stopped. He almost never used her first name. Thank you, he said, for not letting me dismiss you last night. She left without answering because the alternative was to say something about how he was welcome, and that felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate, like thanking someone for not drowning when you were the one who jumped in to save them. Marco came to breakfast. That was the thing about him, the thing she had to actively remind herself of every time she looked at his calm, handsome face across the table. He came to breakfast like a man with nothing to hide. He drank his coffee. He talked to Elena about logistics, about a meeting Alex had at noon, about whether the car needed servicing. He was easy, unhurried, ordinary. He looked at Loretta once during the meal. Just once. Brief. The look of a man cataloging something. She smiled at him. He smiled back. She thought you tried to kill an 8-year-old child. She kept the smile absolutely even. Loretta Couture, he said, setting down his coffee cup. I've been meaning to ask, how are you settling in? This can be an unusual household to adjust to. I'm very comfortable, thank you, she said. Luca keeps me busy. He's a remarkable kid. He really is. Tough, Marco said. Tougher than he looks. A pause measured with care. He's been through a lot. He has, Loretta agreed, but he's getting stronger every day. Marco looked down at his cup, which is all any of us want for him, of course. Of course, she said. She refilled her coffee. Her hands were completely steady. At 10 that morning, while Luca was at his physical therapy appointment in the home gym with his regular therapist, Loretta went looking for something she had no real plan for finding. She told herself she was just walking, familiarizing herself with the house. She'd been here 3 weeks, and there were still rooms she'd never entered, hallways she'd only glanced down. She moved casually, hands in her pockets, the way you move when you're not trying to look like you're doing anything specific. She found Marco's room on the 2nd floor easily enough she'd known which one was his from the first week, from the way he always came and went from that end of the hallway. The door was closed. She stood in front of it for a moment. Then she kept walking. She was not stupid enough to go in his room. Whatever was in there, she didn't need it. She already had the lighter. She already had enough. What she was actually looking for was something she couldn't have named until she almost walked past it. The door to the small room at the end of the second-floor hallway, the one that looked like a storage space that she'd assumed was a storage space, was very slightly open. She could see through the gap a phone charging on a table. Just a phone. Unremarkable. Except that she'd seen Marco walk out of that room twice in the first week, and the security cameras she had noticed did not cover that particular hallway. She stood in the corridor and thought about it. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, unhurried. Not Elena, not the therapist, Marco. She moved, not toward the stairs, toward the end of the hallway. The window there, and she picked up the small watering can sitting on the sill and began watering the plants as if she'd been doing that all along. Marco appeared at the top of the stairs. He saw her. Ms. Vasquez. Neutral, pleasant. The voice of a man who was performing pleasantness. "Oh, sorry, Elena asked me to water these." She gestured at the plants. "I can never remember which ones she said." "The ones on the left," he said. "The right ones are fake." "That's embarrassing." "Not at all." He moved down the hallway, toward the room she'd been looking at. She watched him from the corner of her eye, keeping her attention apparently on the plants. He put his hand on the door, glanced at her. She was looking at the fake plants with the expression of a woman mildly annoyed at being fooled by plastic foliage. He went inside, closed the door. She put the watering can down. She walked downstairs. She went directly to Elena in the kitchen. "The small room at the end of the second-floor hallway," she said quietly. "What's it used for?" Elena didn't ask why. She just looked at Loretta for a moment with those sharp, careful eyes. "Storage. It was converted 8 years ago when Mr. Esposito restructured the house." "Why, no. Marco uses it." A pause. "Marco's room is..." "I know where Marco's room is. He uses that room too. There's a phone in there. I've seen him go in and out at least twice." Elena was quiet, the particular quiet of someone connecting things. "Don't tell him you told me," Loretta said. "Tell Alex." "You're not going to tell him yourself." "I will, but if something happens in the next few hours, I want Alex to already know." Elena's expression shifted just slightly, just enough. The look of a woman who had been paying attention to the wrong things for 3 weeks and was now paying attention to the right ones. "Consider it done," she said to Shum. The afternoon was quiet in the way that isn't actually quiet, the way the surface of water looks still right before something comes up from underneath. Luca finished his therapy session and was tired and slightly irritable, which was the most normal thing she had seen from him in 3 weeks, and she sat with him and let him be irritable without trying to fix it, which he seemed to appreciate more than sympathy. Marco came to watch, Luca said around 3 in the afternoon. Out of nowhere. He was lying on his bedbook, face down on his chest, staring at the ceiling. Loretta went very still. "He came to watch your therapy session. Part of it, he stood in the doorway for a while. He does that sometimes." Luca's voice was careful, measured. "He always says he's just checking in." "Does it bother you?" A long pause. "I don't like the way he looks at me," Luca said. "He looks at me like..." He stopped, like he's checking something off a list. 8 years old, reading The Count of Monte Cristo, looking at the ceiling and describing something most adults would miss. "You're very perceptive," Loretta said. "My father says observation is the most important skill there is." "He's right." Luca turned his head to look at her. "Is something wrong with Marco?" "What makes you ask that?" "Because you've been acting normal all day, but it's a different kind of normal than usual. It's the kind of normal that takes effort." She looked at this child, this extraordinary, careful, isolated child. "When I know something for certain," she said, "I will tell you. Not everything, because some things aren't mine to tell. But what I can, I will." "You promise?" "Yes." He held her gaze for a moment, measuring the way his father measured things, and then he gave that single small nod that she had come to recognize as his version of absolute trust. "Okay," he said. "Will you keep reading?" She picked up the book. She found their page. She started reading, and her voice was steady, and Luca's hands slowly released the armrests of the wheelchair, and the afternoon moved forward minute by careful minute. She was 2 pages in when her phone buzzed. "Alex," one text, no greeting. "He's moving the money, all of it. I found the account. Tonight." She looked at the message for 3 full seconds. Tonight. Marco wasn't going to wait. Whatever he had been waiting for, whatever calculation he had been running, something had shifted. The lighter, her presence, Alex's behavior that morning perhaps. Something had told Marco that his window was closing. She typed back, "Luca is with me. I won't leave him." Alex's response came in under 30 seconds. "Good, don't." She kept reading. Her voice didn't waver. Luca was watching her without watching her the way he did peripheral attention, tracking her the way a compass tracks north. "You're doing the different normal again," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "Give me 10 more minutes." "Okay." She kept reading. She got through 4 more pages before she heard it below them on the ground floor, a sound she couldn't identify immediately. Not a crash, not a shout, something quieter, more deliberate, a door closing very softly, the way you close a door when you don't want anyone to hear you. She lowered the book. Luca was looking at her. "Loretta," he said, very quiet. "I know," she said. She stood up. She walked to his door and listened. The hallway outside was silent in a way that felt different from normal silence, denser charged, the kind of silence that exists in a held breath. She turned back to Luca. "I need you to lock your door after I go out," she said. "Don't open it for anyone except me or your father. Not Elena, not anyone. Just us." "Where are you going?" "To find out what that sound was." "You should stay here." "I know." "Then why?" "Because if I stay here and wait, we're letting someone else control what happens next." She looked at him. "Lock the door, Luca." He wheeled himself to the door. She stepped out. She heard the lock turn solid and definitive from the other side. She turned and faced the empty hallway. Somewhere below her, something was happening. She could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives, not through any single sense, but through all of them at once, a collective animal warning that the air pressure has dropped and the storm is coming. She moved toward the stairs. She did not know what she was about to walk into. She did not know if she was about to be very wrong about everything or right in the worst possible way. What she knew was this: a locked door and a child inside it. And whatever came next, well, she was not going to be the one who stood still and let it happen. She started down the stairs. The first floor was wrong. She knew it before she reached the bottom step, not from anything she could see, but from the absence of things she should have heard. The 2 men who rotated through the ground floor security were always present at this hour. Always. She had learned their rhythms the way you learn the sounds of a house footsteps, radio static, the creak of the chair by the front window. None of it was there. The silence pressed against her ears like cotton. She stopped on the last step. Listened. Nothing. She moved into the front hallway, staying close to the wall. The sitting room to her left was empty. The kitchen straight ahead, she could see through the door, was empty. The reading lamp by the entrance was still on. A half-empty coffee cup sat on the hall table. Recent. Still steaming, slightly. Someone had left in a hurry, or someone had been taken. She was processing this when she heard it from the direction of Alex's office. At the far end of the hallway, the sound of a voice. Low-controlled. Then another voice. Lower still. She moved toward it. The office door was half open. She stopped 4 feet from it and pressed herself to the wall and listened, because walking into a room without understanding what was inside it was the kind of mistake that couldn't be walked back from. "You found the account," Marco's voice. Still that easy, measured tone, but something underneath it now, compressed, like a man who has decided something and is now simply moving through the steps. "Alex, look at me. You found the account." 11 years. Alex's voice was something she had never heard from him before. Not anger, not control, raw, stripped of everything. "I held you in that hospital after the car, Marco. I sat with your mother when she was sick. I trusted you with my son." "Your son." A pause, Guillaume. "Your son is the problem, Alex. He always has been. You've been holding on to this empire with one hand and holding on to him with the other, and you can't do both. You're going to lose everything because you can't let go of a child who can't walk, can't fight, can't..." "Don't..." Alex's voice dropped to something that was almost inaudible. "Do not say another word about my son." "Or what?" And there it was, the mask finally and completely off. "You don't have anyone in this building tonight, Alex. I made sure of that. It's just us." Loretta's heart hammered once hard against her sternum. The two security men. Gone. Elena. She hadn't seen Elena since the kitchen that morning. She pulled out her phone, texted Alex's number. He has the building. I'm in the hall outside your office. She didn't know if he could check his phone. She sent it anyway. Where is the woman? Marco asked. I don't know. She found the lighter, Alex. You know that. She found a lighter. That's all She's been taking everything apart since she walked in here. The plants, the storage room. You think I didn't notice? She's been feeding you information since week 1. A sound movement, something shifting. She's a problem I should have handled earlier. If you touch her, you'll what? The silence that followed was different from every other silence she had experienced in this house. It had weight and shape and velocity, the silence of two men who have arrived at the place beyond words. She needed to move. She needed to do something other than stand in the hallway and listen, while the situation inside that room resolved itself in whatever direction gravity was pulling it. She thought about Luca, locked door, 3rd floor, safe for now, for as long as Marco stayed in that office. She looked down at her phone. No response from Alex. She thought about calling 911. She started composing it in her head. There are men. I think there's a weapon. I don't know the address. I just know it's a townhouse. And even as she was thinking it, she knew that by the time anyone arrived, whatever was going to happen in that room would already have happened. She put the phone in her pocket. She looked at the half-open door. She had run into a burning building without thinking. She understood now that this was simply who she was. Not brave, not heroic, just someone whose instinct toward action was stronger than her instinct toward self-preservation. She had spent 34 years being slightly exasperated by this about herself. She pushed the door open and walked in. Marco turned first. He was fast. She had not expected how fast, which was her first mistake. He had Alex's arm behind his back before she'd fully processed the gun in Marco's right hand, and now that gun was pointed at her, and Alex was between them, and it was all happening in the time it takes to blink twice. There she is, Marco said, perfectly calm. The waitress. Let go of him, she said. Her voice came out level. She had no idea how. You walked into the wrong room. I walked into the right room, she said. I just didn't bring anything useful with me. Marco looked at her. Then he did something she hadn't anticipated. He almost laughed. A real one, short and involuntary. Who are you, he said. Seriously, who are you? Nobody, she said. That's why this doesn't make sense for you. There's nothing to gain from hurting me. I'm a waitress from the West Side. Nobody is going to come looking for me. Whatever your plan is after tonight, I'm not part of it. She was watching his eyes. His eyes were doing what eyes do when a person is recalculating. She kept going. But if you hurt me, you have a body you have to explain. You have a connection to a missing person. And right now you are already moving money and trying to exit cleanly. She paused. I'm a complication. I'm not an obstacle. Let me take the boy and leave, and your problem disappears. Loretta. Alex's voice was strained but controlled. Don't. I'm talking to Marco, she said. Marco's eyes shifted between them. She watched the calculation moving through him, visible if you knew how to look for it. He was not an impulsive man. He had planned for 2 years. He had waited. He had maneuvered. Impulsive men didn't do what he had done. You'd take the kid and go, he said, just like that. Just like that. And you'd say nothing. I'd say what I can prove, which is a lighter with your initials that I no longer have. The lie came out clean and easy. She had given the lighter to Alex. Marco didn't know that. He looked at her. You're bluffing. Maybe. Are you willing to bet your exit on it? The next 5 seconds were the longest 5 seconds of her life. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could see Marco's grip on Alex's arm, the angle of the gun, the distance between herself and the door. She ran the geometry of it without meaning to. If he shot her, Alex would use the distraction, but she would be shot, and the odds of surviving a shot at this range were not okay, Marco said. She blinked, said, okay, he said, again. Go get the kid, front door, 3 minutes. You walk out that door with him, and you keep walking. Marco, Alex's voice sharp and low. She takes the boy and go, Marco said. Your heir disappears into the city. Your empire has no succession, which is the same outcome I wanted, and it doesn't require, he looked at Alex, complexity. She understood in that moment that Marco was also afraid. that somewhere inside the careful, patient, murderous calculation, he was a man who did not want to add more weight to what he was already carrying. That the fire, the bomb, she saw it now, those had been remote, abstract, a plan. This was a room. This was a man he had loved for 11 years. She turned and walked out of the office. She went up the stairs without running. Running would change the sound of everything. She needed Marco to hear her footsteps as normal, as unhurried as a woman collecting a child. She knocked on Luca's door. "It's me," she said. "Open up." The lock clicked. The door opened. Luca looked at her face and said nothing. He wheeled himself back from the door to let her in. She shut the door. She crouched down to his eye level. "Listen to me very carefully," she said. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to be exactly as brave as I know you are." He looked at her, steady. "Okay. Marco has your father downstairs. I made a deal that you and I leave together. Right now, out the front door. And my father, he's working on it." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." She held his gaze. "I need you to trust me." A beat. "And if I don't go with you, then I stay here with you. And whatever happens downstairs, we find out about it together." He considered this with the gravity of a much older person. Then he said, "My father would want me to go." "Yeah, he would want me to go even if he—" He stopped. Something moved through his face, something young and devastated, and then he controlled it the way his father would have, and it broke her heart. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." She got him to the ground floor in 90 seconds. She had expected Marco to be in the hallway. He wasn't. The office door was still half open. She could hear voices inside, lower now, less distinct. She didn't stop to listen. She moved Luca's chair across the hardwood floor as quietly as she could manage, and she reached the front door and she opened it, and the night air came in cold and sharp and real. She got him down the front steps one at a time. The chair tilted back his weight against her, and she thought with a strange peripheral clarity that she had done this before, carried this child down, and that the second time was different from the first because the first time she hadn't known she was capable of it. She had almost reached the sidewalk when she heard it. A gunshot, one, inside the house, muffled by the walls and the heavy front door, but absolutely unmistakably real. She froze. Luca's hands went rigid on the armrests. She could not go back in. She had the boy. She had gotten the boy out. Going back in was Loretta. Luca's voice, barely a whisper. She couldn't go back in. She pulled out her phone, called 911. "Shots fired, I need." She gave the address. She didn't know the address, but she knew the block the cross street enough. She was still talking when the front door opened behind her. She spun around. Alex Esposito stood in the doorway. He was holding a gun, not pointing it, just holding it at his side the way you hold something after you're done with it. There was blood on his left sleeve, not catastrophic, but present. His face was entirely expressionless, in the way that a face is when what happened inside it was too large to express. She stared at him. He looked at Luca. "Are you hurt?" he asked his son. "No," Luca said. "Good." Alex looked at her. "I told you not to come downstairs." "You didn't tell me anything," she said. "You texted me one sentence and went silent." He looked at his phone like he'd forgotten it existed. "Fair. Are you, she gestured at his arm. "I'll live." His voice was very flat. Not emotionless, she had learned the difference. Overloaded. A man who had reached the limit of what could be processed in real time. "We need to move before—" "I called 911, she said. He closed his eyes. "Just for a second." "Of course you did. I didn't know if you were alive." He opened his eyes. He looked at her with something that had no clean name, gratitude and exasperation, and something underneath both of them that was neither. "I'm alive," he said. "I can see that." Marco is not. She absorbed that. She looked at Luca, who was very still, very quiet, hands folded in his lap. His face was the face of a child who was filing something away to deal with later in private, in the way that people who have been alone too long deal with things. "Come here," she said to Luca. She pulled him forward, the chair, all of it, and she put her arms around him from behind, just for a moment, just enough. He didn't pull away. He leaned back against her very slightly, just the weight of his shoulders, and she felt him breathe. "It's over," she said into the top of his head. He didn't answer, but his hands unclenched from the armrests. The next 4 hours were the organized chaos of consequence. Police arrived different detectives than Reyes and Moretti, though Moretti showed up eventually and stood near the back of the room with an expression she couldn't fully read. Lawyers appeared with the efficiency of people on permanent retainer. Alex sat at his own kitchen table giving a version of events to men in suits who were either law enforcement or legal counsel or possibly both, and she sat in the corner with Luca and drank bad coffee from a travel mug someone had produced, and she answered questions when they were asked of her, and she did not embellish and she did not minimize. At one point, Moretti appeared next to her. He crouched down beside her chair. "You want to tell me how a waitress from the West Side ended up in the middle of all this," he said. "You want to tell me why you recognized my description of Luca the first time I gave it to you," she replied. He looked at her for a moment. Then he straightened up. "We had the boy on a watch list, protection protocol. When you described him to us, there was a question of whether we should inform you or whether it was better to leave me ignorant. It was a complicated situation. There was a child in a burning building. Yes, he had the grace to look uncomfortable. There was. Was the watch list because of Marco? We had been monitoring Marco Vitale for approximately 7 months. We believed he was planning something against the Esposito organization, but we didn't have..." He stopped himself. "This is more than I should be telling you. You're telling me because you feel guilty," she said, "which means you could have warned someone and didn't." He didn't answer. She let it sit. "The boy is safe," she said finally. "That's what matters." Moretti looked at Luca, who had fallen asleep in his wheelchair, with his head tilted to the side and his book still open in his lap. There was something genuine in the detective's expression when he looked at the sleeping child. Something actual. "Yeah," he said quietly, "that's what matters." He went back to his colleagues. Loretta looked at Luca. His face in sleep was finally completely the face of a child. All the composure and the gravity and the careful control of it gone. Just a small boy sleeping in a chair, which was the most peaceful thing she had seen in weeks. She pulled his book gently from his lap. She set it on the table next to her cold coffee. Alex came and sat down across from her sometime near 2 in the morning, when most of the suits had thinned out and the police had finished their primary sweep of the house. He looked like a man who had aged in increments over the course of an evening. His arm had been bandaged, the wound was a graze, nothing that required a hospital, or so the man he'd apparently called specifically for this purpose had determined. He looked at Luca for a long moment, then he looked at her. "I owe you," he said again. "You don't owe me anything." "I do. I dismissed you. When you brought me the lighter, You were trying to protect him when you trusted. That's not a flaw. It almost got my son killed, twice." "Yes," she said, "it did." She didn't soften it. He didn't seem to want her to. He sat with it for a moment, the way you sit with something that you have to carry accepting the weight. "What do you want?" he asked. "After tonight. Whatever you want, a place to stay, money, I want Luca to be okay," she said. "That's it. That's the whole thing." Alex looked at her for a long time. "You're a very strange person," he said. Not unkindly, with the particular tone of a man for whom most things had price tags encountering something that didn't. "I've been told," she said. "Will you stay?" He asked it carefully, not as the question he had asked on the sidewalk, the employer's question, the calculated offer, something less certain than that, something that had more at stake. Not as an employee, yes, there would be, the arrangements would be. He stopped, started over. "Luca trusts you. He trusts nobody. He trusted you in 3 weeks when he spent 2 years not trusting anyone I've put in front of him." "I know. So will you stay?" She looked at the sleeping boy. She thought about the burning building, the stairs, the heat, the moment of coming through the door into the cold morning air. She thought about the way his hands had felt around her neck, trusting her completely with his weight, with his life. She thought about thank you, 2 words, careful and precise. She looked at Alex, this complicated, damaged, dangerous man, sitting at 2 in the morning, in a house full of policemen asking her a question he had no right to ask, and every reason to ask, with something in his face she couldn't name and didn't try to. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. She reached over and pulled Luca's blanket. Someone had brought it down. Elena probably, who had reappeared at some point in the past 2 hours, without anyone explaining where she'd been, up over the boy's shoulders. He didn't wake. He turned slightly toward the warmth of it, the way children do. He needs to sleep in an actual bed, she said. I'll carry him. You have a bandaged arm. I've done worse with worse injuries. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them moved for a moment. Alex, she said, let me. He stepped back. She lifted Luca, still asleep, surprisingly heavy for a child who had always seemed so light, and she carried him toward the stairs. She heard Alex's footstep behind her close, but not too close, the way you walk behind someone you were watching over. She got Luca to his bed. She got him settled. She pulled the blanket over him properly, and he made a small, sleep-thick sound and turned on his side, and that was all. She stood in the doorway. Alex was behind her. He was looking at his son with an expression that was for once entirely unguarded. It was the look of a man who has come very close to losing everything and is now standing in front of what he almost lost, unable to speak, unable to move, just present. Just there. She left them to it. She walked to her own room. She sat on the edge of her bed. She was shaking. She had been not shaking all evening, and now alone in the silence she was shaking. She pressed her palms flat against her knees. 1 breath. 2. She thought about the fire, about the stairs, about Luca's face at the window, about the fact that none of it, not 1 second of any of it, had happened by accident. She had run into a burning building, and she had pulled a child out of it, and it had changed everything. And she did not know yet what everything looked like now changed. She only knew that the shape of it was different from before. She stopped shaking eventually. She lay down, still dressed, and looked at the ceiling and thought, I am still here. Simple as that. I am still here. She closed her eyes. Outside the door, the house was finally genuinely quiet. She woke up at 6:15 to the sound of Luca laughing. It stopped her cold. She lay in bed for a full 3 seconds, just listening to it, because she had not heard that sound before. Not once in 3 weeks. She had heard him quiet and careful and occasionally dry in that understated way of his, but she had not heard him laugh. Not like this. Open and unguarded and completely unself-conscious, the way children laugh when they forget they're supposed to be serious. She got up. She followed the sound. They were in the kitchen, Alex and Luca. Alex was at the stove, which was shocking enough on its own. She had never seen him anywhere near the kitchen, and he was doing something wrong with eggs, and Luca was watching from his wheelchair with an expression of genuine delight at the wrongness of it. That is not how you do that, Luca said. I know how to cook eggs. You are burning the eggs. They're not burned, they're caramelized. That is not what caramelized means. How do you know what caramelized means? Elena told me. Also, I read it. Loretta stood in the doorway and watched a Mafia boss argue with his 8-year-old son about eggs at 6 in the morning, and she felt something happen in her chest that she did not have a precise word for. It was warm and it was sharp, and it was the particular feeling of witnessing something that almost didn't exist. Alex looked up and saw her. Don't, he said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to offer to cook the eggs. I have it handled. Papa, Luca said very seriously, you do not have it handled. Alex looked at his son. Something in his face did a complicated thing, amusement and affection, and the faint, ragged edge of everything that had happened the night before all at once. He put the spatula down. He stepped back from the stove. Fine, he said. You cook the eggs. I can't reach the stove. Loretta will reach the stove. You instruct. I'll watch. And so she cooked eggs at 6:15 in the morning, while Luca directed her with the calm authority of a very small executive, and Alex sat at the kitchen table with his bandaged arm and his cold coffee and watched them both. And the house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Not the dense, pressurized quiet of secrets and surveillance, but the ordinary quiet of a morning beginning. She did not let herself believe it would last. She was not that naive, but she let herself be present in it fully and without reservation, because presence was the only honest response to something this rare. The fallout came in waves over the following 2 weeks. She had expected it to be worse. Or perhaps she had expected it to be more dramatic, more like the movies where consequences arrived all at once in a single catastrophic event. Instead, it came the way real consequences come steadily, exhaustingly in layers. The police interviews were first. She sat across from 3 different sets of investigators over 4 days and told the same story each time because It was the truth, and the truth has the advantage of internal consistency. Yes, she had found the lighter. Yes, she had reported it to Alex Esposito. Yes, she had been present in the building when the confrontation occurred. No, she had not witnessed the shooting itself. No, she had not been coerced into any statement. Moretti sat in on 2 of these sessions. He said nothing both times, but she was aware of him, the way you're aware of something watching you from a peripheral angle. On the second day as she was leaving, he fell into step beside her in the corridor. The account Marco was moving money into, he said quietly, you should know that it wasn't just Esposito money. He had been collecting from 3 other organizations for 4 years. He was building towards something significant. Are you telling me this because you think I'll pass it on to Alex? I'm telling you this because you deserve to understand the full scope of what you walked into. She stopped walking, turned to face him. And what is the full scope? Marco Vitali was not just a betrayal. He was a coordinated operation. Someone else was funding him, directing him, someone outside the Esposito organization. Someone who wanted Alex gone and Luca gone and the resulting vacuum to fill. Do you know who? We have a direction, Moretti said. Not a name yet. She absorbed that. You're telling me it's not over, she said. I'm telling you to be careful, he said, which I should have told you 6 weeks ago. He walked away. She stood in the hallway alone. She thought about the burned-out brownstone, the fire that hadn't been an accident, the bomb that hadn't been an accident, the 11 years Marco had spent inside Alex's trust building, towards something and the person still unnamed, still unfound, who had been pulling his strings. She thought about Luca in the kitchen that morning, coaching her on egg temperatures with complete seriousness. She went home. She thought of it as home now, which itself was a small seismic shift, and she said nothing about what Moretti had told her. Not yet. She sat with it for 2 days, turning it over, measuring it, deciding what shape it was. On the 3rd day, she told Alex. He was in his office. It was late evening. The house settled into its new rhythms, and she sat across from his desk and told him everything Moretti had said plainly and without editorial. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. You waited 2 days, he said. I wanted to decide how to tell you. Why does it matter how you tell me? Because, she said carefully, the last time you received information, you weren't ready for your first instinct was to dismiss it, and I needed to make sure you were ready. He looked at her for a long moment. And you've decided I'm ready. I've decided you're readier than you were. He was quiet again. Then, someone directed Marco, someone with enough resources to fund a multi-year operation and enough patience to wait it out. Yes, which means whoever it is, they know Marco failed. They know the plan collapsed. And they know, he stopped. They know Luca is still alive, she finished. Yes. The word landed in the room with the weight of everything it implied. Alex's jaw tightened. She watched him move through it, through the fear, through the anger, through the instinct to react until he reached the other side where the thinking was. We need to change how we operate, he said. Yes. Luca can't stay. He stopped again. He can't stay visible the way he has been. That's true, but invisible isn't the same as hidden. Hidden is just a different kind of cage. Alex looked at her. What would you do? I'd find out who it is, she said, before they find another Marco. And while I'm doing that, while you're doing that, I'll be here. She said it simply. That's not nothing. He looked at her, the full weight of his attention direct and unqualified, and she held it without flinching. No, he said quietly, it's not nothing. The twist came on a Tuesday morning, 17 days after Marco. Luca found it. He had been going through books in the library on the first floor. She had started allowing him more independence in the house. Recognizing that independence was itself a kind of rehabilitation when he came to her with an envelope. Small, cream-colored, tucked inside a copy of the Iliad on the 3rd shelf. He held it out to her. It has my name on it, he said, in Marco's handwriting. She went very still. She took the envelope carefully, the way you handle something you suspect is either important or dangerous, which in this case might have been both. She looked at it. Luca's name on the front written in a precise slanted hand. No stamp, no return address. Have you opened it? She asked. No, I brought it to you. She looked at him. Why? Because you told me that when you knew something for certain you would tell me. I'm doing the same, she called Alex. He was there in 4 minutes. He looked at the envelope, he looked at his son, He looked at Loretta. I'll open it, Luca said. Luca, it has my name on it. He was absolutely calm. It's my letter. Alex and Loretta exchanged a look over Luca's head. She gave a small nod. Alex stepped back. Luca opened the envelope. He read what was inside in silence, and his face went through several things she tracked carefully. Confusion, then a kind of recognition, then something harder to name. He finished reading. He held the letter in his lap for a moment, then he handed it to his father. She read it over Alex's shoulder. It was short, 12 lines, in Marco's careful, slanted handwriting. Luca, you won't understand this now. Maybe you will when you're older. I loved your father the way a man loves the person who made him. And I destroyed him because of it. Not because I hated him, because I needed to be something he wasn't, and I didn't know how to become that thing without taking his place. The man paying me is named Santoro, Domenico Santoro. He approached me 4 years ago. He has people inside 3 precincts and 2 federal offices. Be careful, be smarter than I was. I'm sorry. M. The silence in the room was absolute. Alex lowered the letter. Santoro, he said. The name came out flat and hard like a stone dropped on concrete. You know him, Loretta said, not a question. I know of him. He's been peripheral, a smaller operation. I never considered him a serious issue. He stopped. The look on his face was something new. Not the devastation of Marco's betrayal, but the colder, more focused look of a man recalibrating an entire understanding of his landscape. He was never peripheral. He was patient. Marco left you a name, Loretta said slowly. After everything he did, he left you the name. He left Luca the name, Alex said. They both looked at Luca, who was sitting very still, hands in his lap, looking at the space where the letter had been. He said he was sorry, Luca said. Quiet, factual. Do you think he meant it? Alex crouched down in front of his son's wheelchair. She had not seen him do this before, get physically lower, make himself smaller, and he looked at Luca directly. I think, Alex said slowly, that people can mean things and still do them anyway. That's the most frightening thing about being human. We are capable of knowing something is wrong and doing it regardless. Then how do you know who to trust? Luca asked. Alex was quiet. He looked at Loretta briefly, then back at his son. You look for the people who run toward the fire, he said, when everyone else is running out. Luca looked at Loretta. She looked at the carpet. Okay, Luca said. Okay. What happened next took months, not days. She had expected it to be faster, had somehow internalized from years of stories and films and the dramatic compression of narrative, that resolution was a thing that arrived completely and all at once. It wasn't. It was slow and careful and unglamorous, and she was present for almost none of the specifics of it because the specifics were not her world, and she had no illusion that they were. What she was present for was Luca. She was present when the new physical therapist came younger, louder, with a different approach than the one before, and Luca hated her for 2 weeks and then grudgingly admitted she was better. She was present for his 9th birthday in March, which was small and deliberate, and nothing like the birthdays of children in movies, no large parties, no spectacle. Just the 3 of them at the kitchen table with a cake that Loretta made from scratch badly and that Luca ate every piece of anyway. She was present the first morning he woke up and reached for the book on his nightstand before he reached for the wheelchair, because he had been asleep and hadn't remembered yet that the wheelchair was what came first, and for one unguarded second, his face had the expression of a child who had simply purely forgotten. She told no one about that moment. She kept it somewhere private. She was present the evening Alex came home and sat in the kitchen and didn't open his laptop or make a call or do any of the things he usually did when he sat down, and she put a cup of tea in front of him without asking and sat across from him, and they were quiet together in the easy, unforced way of people who had moved past the stage of needing to fill silence. Santoro, he said eventually. What about him? It's handled. She didn't ask what that meant. She had made a quiet, private decision early on that there were rooms in Alex Esposito's life she would not enter, not because she was forced out of them, but because she understood her own limits and she understood what she could carry and what she couldn't. Are we safe? She asked. Safer, he said. Not safe. I don't think safe is a thing I can honestly offer. I know. You deserve akata. Alex. She said his name the way you say someone's name when you want them to stop and actually hear you. I made my choice. I'm not waiting for something safer to come along. This is the thing I chose. He looked at her with that expression she had never fully learned to categorize, the one that lived somewhere between intensity and gratitude, and something she had been for months carefully declining to name. Why, he asked. It was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not self-deprecating. He actually wanted to know. She thought about it honestly, the way she did everything. Because Luca needed someone, she said. And then I stayed because it turns out that the people in this house needed more than a caretaker. And I don't walk away from things that need me. It's a flaw. My mother told me it was a flaw my whole life. Your mother was wrong, Alex said. She was wrong about most things, Loretta agreed. He almost smiled. The real one, the one she had seen precisely 3 times, each one feeling like a small, particular privilege. I want to show you something, he said. He led her up to the 3rd floor, past Luca's room. She could see the light under the door. The boy still awake reading, and into the room at the very end of the hallway that she had never been into. He opened the door. It was a sitting room, small, quiet, a window that faced east, 2 chairs, a bookshelf. Someone had recently placed fresh flowers on the table between the chairs. Elena said you had a habit of reading in the hallway because your room faced the wrong direction for morning light, Alex said. She mentioned it approximately 8 times over the course of a month. Loretta looked at the room, the chairs, the flowers. This is for me, she asked. It's yours, he said, if you want it. She stood in the doorway and looked at the room. This small, quiet room with its eastward window and its 2 chairs and its complete, uncomplicated offering of a place that was just hers, and she felt something she recognized finally as the sensation of arriving somewhere after a very long time of moving. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Elena did all of it. I just carried the chair. With your bandaged arm. It wasn't that heavy. You are a terrible patient. I've been told. She stepped into the room. She sat in one of the chairs. The light was already different in here. She could feel it, even without the sun. The quality of east-facing space, the particular promise of morning. Alex leaned in the doorway. He didn't come in. He just looked at her. This man who had built an empire on the premise that everything had a price and everyone had a limit, looking at the one person in his house who seemed to operate on entirely different mathematics. I'm not easy, he said. It came out blunt and without self-pity. Just honest. My life is not easy. What I am, what I do, I am not going to pretend it becomes simple because I know, she said. I've known since the sidewalk. And you stayed. I stayed. He was quiet for a moment. I don't know how to be the kind of man who deserves what you have given this family. Then learn, she said. Luca is very patient. He'll teach you. The thing that moved through Alex Esposito's face in that moment was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen from him. It lasted only a second, barely that, but she saw it completely. All of it. The grief and the gratitude and the particular exhausted, bewildered wonder of a man who had spent decades believing himself to be beyond the reach of anything genuinely good, discovering that he was wrong. He nodded once. He left. She heard his footsteps go down the hall. She heard them stop outside Luca's room. She heard the knock quiet, not tentative, just respectful, and then Luca's voice, "Come in," and then the sound of the door opening and closing and silence. She sat in her chair in her east-facing room and listened to the silence and knew without needing to see it what was happening on the other side of that wall. A father, his son, a book probably. The slow, imperfect, absolutely necessary work of 2 people learning how to be in the same room without distance between them. She had not saved a child from a burning building in order to end up here. She had not done any of it with any plan or design or awareness of what it would cost her or what it would give her. She had run in because a small face had appeared in a window and her legs had moved before her brain had been consulted. And everything that followed, the fear, the danger, the revelation, the grief, the slow and improbable construction of something real in the ashes of everything that had burned, had followed from that one instinctive, unconsidered act. She picked up her book from the small table beside the chair. She opened it to her page. She read. Outside the window, Manhattan moved through its ordinary Tuesday night, indifferent, relentless, magnificent. And inside this house, on this hallway, 3 people who had no business becoming a family were quietly, stubbornly, irrevocably becoming one anyway. That was not a small thing. That was not a coincidence. That was not luck. That was what happened when someone refused to stop at the door of a burning building and look away. That was what courage actually cost and what it actually bought. And it was worth every single step of it.